Hi, I'm Ben.
I'm Daniel.
This is The Way. So, our last video, we had Daniel talking about his relationships and his experiences with that and how it would either bring him closer or farther from God in terms of hearing Him and whatnot. And we just felt it would be beneficial for me to also talk about my experiences with different relationships and how I incorporated God into those or didn't. So, growing up, I was homeschooled, and so I didn't really have a lot of, nice face. I didn't really have a lot of interaction with women outside of my family until I hit high school. But once I hit high school, then the search for having a girlfriend and feminine relationships started to occur. I had my first girlfriend my junior year of high school. We went to homecoming together and prom and whatnot, and that was fun. But to be honest with you, I was kind of, when she sort of asked me out to go to homecoming, and I at first was like, ew, no, I don't want to go with you, because she wasn't really like my type, and she was kind of weird from my perspective. I had known her my whole life, like through middle school and whatnot. But then I kind of got into it with her, and I was like, well, actually, in a certain light, you are cute, and you're fun to hang around, and I have known you for a while, so maybe this will work out. And I was just kind of in it to be in it because I wanted to have a girlfriend, and the opportunity arose. And so, we obviously dated for like a year, and we would kiss and make out and stuff, and then she broke up with me, and even though at the beginning I wasn't like super duper into her, by the end of it, I told myself that I loved this woman, and I had pictured myself being with her long term and whatnot, and so I was actually pretty sad when she left. And then all through summer of that year, this was like I graduated high school, was gonna go into college. I was super depressed, super lonely because of the breakup, and I was like, I don't know if I'm ever gonna have a girlfriend again and whatnot. And I did try to flirt with like other women in college and whatnot, but it didn't go too successfully because women in college are much different than women in high school, and they're looking for different things, and I was looking in the wrong places because I was at that point on my journey to sexual immorality. I was looking for more like sexual relationships and relationships where I could do more with a girl. And so I was looking in the wrong place. I was looking for the wrong women, and things just were not working out too well for me. And I guess I should also premise with this. Daniel mentioned that when he met like both of his girlfriends that we'll talk about later, he asked God before he dated each and every one of them. And so even though they didn't work out, he still asked God beforehand. I didn't do that. I just, if the opportunity arose and there was a woman that was interested in me, I would go after it. I would pursue it without thinking, is this going to be good for my faith walk? Is this going to be good for me as just a person, even excluding God, sort of thing? And so, get into college, and then I met this other girl that I had mentioned in the past couple videos, the baby mama. She's the mother of my child and whatnot. And when we got into a relationship, actually, she was still technically with another man in a relationship with him, and I was just kind of on the back burner. I was the side guy, and I was looking for one thing and she was looking for one thing, and I told myself it would be okay because she told me that this other guy was like abusive and not so good for her, and I wanted to be the hero sort of guy. I wanted to be the guy that was going to save her out of the... Yeah, exactly, right? I wanted to be the guy that wasn't that. And so I had always told myself I'm not going to be that guy for her. So eventually, we're hooking up. And then her and her boyfriend split. And then for like another, I don't know, 2 or 3 months, I'm trying to ask her out because at this point I'm invested. She was my first ever person that I ever had sex with. I lost my virginity to her, and so I was kind of...
There's a connection there.
Yeah, there was a connection there,
yeah.
and I didn't want to let it go, and I was starting to fall in love with her as much as you can fall in love with someone in an ungodly way, and through that she eventually decided to date me, and the rest of the story from my testimony. We had a family and whatnot, had a little girl, but each and every one of my relationships has been based off of 2 things. Number one, I didn't want to be alone. I like to have people around me. I'm very extroverted. I like to always have someone in my circle to talk to. I don't like being by myself, or at least I didn't back then. I'm much better at it now. And number 2, it was for the physical aspect, because I'm also a very sexual person, and I wasn't respectful of myself or of God, and so I wanted to have sex, and I wanted to have not just sex, but like I wanted to cuddle and do the kissing and go on dates and stuff. So our relationship, even though her and I were together for 2 years after that, and we had a kid, it was deep in a sense, but it wasn't very deep, because we didn't have like a lot of the hard conversations before we had sex. We just kind of went for it, And then after we were, 6 months, a year into the relationship, and that honeymoon phase starts to fade out, then some of those flaws start to, peek out, and some of those questions that we didn't ask each other started to peek out, and we just kind of saw more and more that we were never really compatible, or at least we didn't make the right stepping stones to be compatible. Because I think anyone can be compatible. I think it's just that you need to take those
Well, some
specific
people
steps.
just take more work, right? There's
Some
going to be
people-
some people that are easier,
Right.
than others.
Right.
So,
And so, as that went on, she became not so happy in the relationship. I became not very happy in the relationship for slightly different reasons. That's a whole nother video. But, like, we would have a lot of fights, and I would get very angry with her for past things that she did, and, she would just shut down, and we would try to have hard conversations, but I was doing it in a very aggressive tone where it's almost like I'm blaming her for stuff versus like, let's talk about this. And she was too afraid to bring things up to me because, I presented myself as like, well, I can't do anything wrong, and I would just be super offended if she brought something up that was my fault. I would be like, no, that's not true, like, that's dumb, So through that process, I wasn't doing a lot of self-reflection. But then near the end of our relationship, before we split and before she left, God was starting to talk to me again and starting to try to pull me back and trying to mend things with me. And through that, I was able to sort of start, like, he wasn't talking to me to help me with my relationship with her, but he was talking with me to help me as a person. So, like, he was trying to get me to heal some of those wounds that I had from previous relationships, and he was trying to heal some of the anger that I had a lot of anger 2-3 years ago. And so I don't know what I'm trying to say here. I guess basically, like, I wasn't ready for a relationship with any of these women because I didn't know who I was, and I was so angry and so insecure at myself that, and I didn't love myself, and so if I don't love myself and I wasn't loving God, how can I give love to someone else, sort of thing, right? If I'm not willing to take care of myself, how am I going to be able to take care of a wife or a family? I wasn't helping around doing chores in the house. I wasn't being emotionally supportive to her. And, when different things arose, I just saw her more and more as a pest or like a nuisance in my life versus like this is a person who has needs and I'm supposed to be her rock. And I wasn't there to be her rock. So, yeah, that's kind of what I got right
So you're in a relationship now.
I'm in a relationship now.
And looking at the two, you said that in your previous relationships you weren't ready for a relationship. How did you know going into this relationship you're in now, which is great? How did you know you were ready for this one?
That's a great question. So, Natalie and I split. Natalie, sorry guys. Natalie and I split up about 2 years ago, and one of the first things that went through my head when she split up is I don't want to be alone, but also I shouldn't be in another relationship because one of the first things that happened when she left was like I looked at myself in the mirror and I just couldn't recognize myself. I didn't know who I was physically, spiritually, any of that. And so that was the first thing I knew is I needed to get to know who I was and I needed to fix the wreck that was me 2 years ago. And so I've been working on that for 2 years. I was single for about 2 years before I got into this new relationship. And then the second thing, and this is probably more important for the person I'm with versus like more important for me, I didn't want to use whoever I was going to be with to try and make Natalie jealous of that person. I didn't want to use that person as a playing piece in my schemes or to try and get back at her or anything. So I wanted to make sure that I knew who I was, and I wanted to make sure that I wasn't using the person. And I guess the third thing is I wanted to make sure I could actually have a fruitful relationship where I wasn't jumping into sex and I wasn't just jumping into the feelings part of it. I wanted to make sure I could build a firm foundation so that we could have a real relationship that could last a lifetime, marriage sort of thing.
Right.
So I hope that answers that question.
Yeah. We'll come back to your girlfriend because I have another question on that. But I want to jump backwards a little bit. You said that you were homeschooled, and then when you got to high school, you kind of jumped in. And so I guess my question is, when you were homeschooled, how do you feel like, did that help or hinder you as far as knowing expectations and thoughts as far as relationships went?
Yeah.
And then, how so?
Right. Well, I think that homeschool as a whole for me kind of held me back, not just with romantic relationships, but with relationships in general, because I grew up I didn't start going to high school until my sophomore year of high school, so
you were the new kid.
Exactly. So for about 9 years, I was just me and my 3 brothers at home, and my mom was my teacher, and we were the community that we had. So I only knew how to interact with any of them, and then we would have obviously family get-togethers a couple times. So I had cousins that were female, and I had some female friends that lived in the same neighborhood as me. But interacting with other women and other people wasn't a normal thing for me. I was very socially awkward. I didn't have much empathy because I just kind of grew up learning to care about my. I was the bully at my homeschool school. I bullied my brothers, right? So I didn't have much empathy for anyone because I bullied everyone. But I would say it hindered me because I did not know, number one, how to handle just a regular friend relationship, and then on top of that, I also didn't know what a woman was. Women are so much more.
What is a woman?
Right. Well, what a woman is emotionally and physically is just so much more different than me as a man that I didn't know how to handle or treat that. In a proper way.
woman that's not your relative.
Right, in a
Right.
woman that's not my real, yeah, because I'm not romantically interested or pursuing a relationship with someone that I'm related to. So I just didn't have any. I had no idea, you know.
Yeah.
Right. So maybe it would have. You know, I can't speak for this, but maybe it would have been different if my sister maybe lived with it. But I didn't have that opportunity. My sister was way older and already out of the house. So
Okay, another question. In your family growing up, I know that relationships were a big topic in my family. Was that a big topic in your family? What was your parents' perspective, opinion, and did you have a lot of conversations or input from them as far as relationships, or is it just more like you kind of jumped in without a lot of guidance?
gotcha. Yeah, I got to be honest. My parents did not talk to me much about what it meant to be in a relationship. They always emphasized that marriage was a big thing and it's a big deal and it's a lifetime commitment, so you got to be
And for the long haul.
and for the long haul, so you got to be very intentional. And my dad gave me like the sex talk when I was 12. But outside of that, they didn't really talk to me much about like how to treat a woman in a relationship. They didn't really talk about that. So all I saw was like how my dad and mom would interact with each other. And so, you know, that's kind of the only example I had. My dad is big on service. My dad does like all the dishes. He does the laundry. He mows, you know. And it's not that my mom isn't willing to do that stuff. It's just that he wants to make sure that she doesn't have to.
Right. Yeah.
You know, he loves her so much that as
it's
men,
definitely
we are,
a testament of his love. To
yeah.
her.
In the Bible, it says that us men are called to lay down our lives for our wives and to serve them. And so my dad really does well on the service part of being a husband, making sure that he makes enough money. So like my mom was our homeschool teacher. She wasn't being paid for years, right? Like my dad made all the money and whatnot. Obviously, gender roles can fluctuate on, you know, depending on your circumstance, but like that's how my family worked. But yeah, my dad always made sure that, you know, he knew my mom's strengths, and so if there was something that she was better at, like bills or shopping, he would let her kind of handle that. He, you know, if he was going out shopping, he would always ask her, "Hey, what do you need?" You know,
Right,
sort of
right.
thing. And so, yeah, I guess my example from home wasn't really like talked about, but it was shown through my dad.
Okay.
It's just that I'm kind of hindsighting it now, seeing how, you know, I didn't really pay attention to that.
Right.
And also, before I went through my transformation, I used to tell my dad that I didn't think he was a real man. I really thought he was kind of a wimp and kind of a pushover. But now I'm looking back at it, and it's like, no, my dad's so strong for being able to put up with all the stuff that me and like my other siblings, you know, put him through the ringer. It's not that he's not strong enough or not willing to do something about it. It's just that like my dad's very intentional about when he shows aggression or when he shows boundaries or discipline, like
Which is the true sign of a strong man, is the intentionality of that kind of thing.
right,
Having the ability to do it and choosing to not.
right. So,
Yeah. Okay. I have another question.
okay,
You mentioned hard conversations that you didn't have with Natalie. What are some examples of that? What kind of hard conversations are you having in your relationship now that you wish you'd had before?
yeah. Well, the big thing for me, honestly, and this came, wow. The big thing was my spirituality, and because when you're with a woman and you're intending to be with her forever, you're gonna have kids, and then deciding how you're going to discipline the kids, how you're going to raise them. Are they going to get baptized in the Catholic Church or in the Baptist Church? Are they not going to get baptized at all if
Right.
you're married to an atheist, right? I didn't have that conversation with her. There was this one time where, you know, we're having sex and I wasn't wearing a condom. This is going to get a little graphic. And, you know, I finished, right? And it was kind of an accidental thing, and she was freaking out, and she was like, "Oh my gosh, gotta take the after pill, you know, the Plan B or
Abortion
whatever,
pill.
Plan B." And I freaked out. I was like, "No, you can't do that because I believe that I believe that abortion is murder. I believe that life is important. I'll do whatever I need to do to take care. And so she's watching me freak out about this, but she doesn't understand why, because she wasn't in the same spiritual space, or she didn't have the same view on abortion at the time. And this happened, like, this wasn't what caused our child. That was like months, like a few months into our relationship, right? But like, not having that conversation beforehand, I didn't even think about, like, oh, accidents can happen in sex. She could have decided to take the Plan B pill, and then I would have been
Devastated.
I would have been thinking about, like, oh, because I wasn't abstinent, or because I didn't have this talk, I caused this abortion to happen, or right? And so, yeah, not having some of those hard talks, or like we talked about in the last video with Daniel, Natalie was very similar to his ex-girlfriend, Cheryl, where she was very heavily influenced by her parents. And so when we were living together, there were a lot of times where we were trying to make a financial decision, and her parents would try to get involved, and Natalie would try to, listen to them, even though I knew it wasn't a good financial decision, because I don't want to toot my horn. I'm pretty good with money. Fairly good. I'm fairly responsible with it. Her parents weren't necessarily. Or there was this one time where they were asking us for money, and I was like, no, we don't have $2,000 to give you. And Natalie was devastated by that, because, her mom's like, well, why can't you give us $2,000? We're going to pay you back in like 2 days or whatever. And I put my foot down. I was like, no, we can't do it. Because, I saw it as, even though we weren't technically married, I saw it as a marriage, and I was separated from my parents, and we were making decisions based on what our family needed. But Natalie was still very much connected with her parents, and she was still concerned about what her family needed versus
Right.
like what our needs were, having a kid and whatnot. So, you know, just different things like that. We didn't really talk about like how the home life was going to be, how the raising of our kids was going to be, different political views, different religious views. We just never talked about it, and we would have a lot of fights based off of those things. Viewing how like sex should be handled, viewing how, all that stuff. Just we never talked about it because we were just so entangled in our lust for each other that we weren't thinking about it. So
Yeah.
I hope that answers.
That answers that question. Yeah.
Cool.
Last question, and we'll end on this one. What are some things that you've done now, going into this new relationship, that you didn't do before?
Yeah.
Like, how did you start that from a Catholic perspective, in a Catholic way, as opposed to with the other ones?
Cool. Well, okay, so last video Daniel talked about a relationship that he had with an ex, and then we met each other, and then for like two, 3 months he was single, but then he met this other girl that God said it's okay if you date. And they started dating, and I was still single at the time, but I was pretty much involved from point A to point C through this whole thing, and I was just like watching every step that Daniel took.
Involved as in like I would share a lot with him, and we would talk a lot about it and process together.
Right, I wanted to know like what conversations are you having with this girl? What things have you guys done physically? What kind of and Daniel was kind enough to share with me the different steps that he took, different things that he was waiting on. Like I remember you would like just started hanging out with her, and she asked, "Are we girlfriend and boyfriend?" And you're like, "No, we're still friends," because you had this boundary of like, I'm gonna get to know you a little bit better before we go out. Or like finally you guys went out, and it's like you haven't even kissed yet. Like I was watching these different steps of like Daniel waiting for God to say it's okay if I do this or not. And so when I saw Daniel do that, me changing my life into following God much more, I knew that I wanted that for my next relationship. So, there were a few girls in between then and the girl I'm dating now where, I I remember I was asking God before I would go and ask them out, because normally I would just go ask him to go do things. I would ask God, God, is it okay if I go ask this girl out? And I would either hear yes or no, or if I didn't, I would ask Daniel, and Daniel was like, no, I don't think you should. You know, like, I think this person's just supposed to be your friend, or whatever. Or there were times where it was like I wasn't hearing anything from God, and Daniel was like, I don't really know, dude, and I would try to pursue it, and then it just wouldn't work out. But then finally, I met this girl. God was like, you should ask her out. Daniel was like, you know, if you think God said that, you can do, you know. And so,
because at a certain point, Ben and I were working, and I was trying to help him to figure out the kind of discernment that I do. Because at first it took him a little longer to gather it. And so at a certain point, like, my mom does this with me too. When I ask her, I'm like, hey, Mom, what do you think? Sometimes she just is like, I think that you need to pray about this because this is your decision. I don't, I shouldn't be here influencing you. This is between you and God. And so that was definitely a decision where Ben asked me, and I was like, that's got to be between you and God.
right. But then, I guess to get back to your question.
Yeah, sorry.
No, it's okay. So, like, I put all that build up to actually answer this question. So, when I finally asked the girl out for the first time, I actually didn't even ask her out on an official date. I just asked her to hang out. I told myself I wasn't going to get emotionally attached on this first meeting. I just wanted to get to know her as a person, and actually just wanted to treat her as a friend. So we went out and we played tennis, and we had a great time. I was very intentional in the different questions I asked her. You know, I was like, hey, what made you want to be Catholic? Because she had just converted to Catholicism, and asked her about different dynamics with her family, and that went really well. And then, you know, we kept going out for, I think, 2 or 3 weeks before I officially asked her to be my girlfriend, because I had gathered the data I needed to say, okay, there's a good foundation here for a dating relationship in discerning marriage. And so, you know, I was very clear when I asked her out. I was like, I'm going to court you, and we're going to do this to discern whether dating is a good option. So I was, you know, in the past it was just like, all right, we're going to go out and we're going to do this thing. We're full on boyfriend, girlfriend. This time I really took, it took me a full month to really get into it. You know, so I didn't, the other thing is that I was always the first one to initiate a kiss. I was the first one to initiate I love you. I made sure I wasn't the first one to initiate a kiss in this relationship, because I knew that I'm a very sexual person, and, you know, that can blind me to certain things. So I just made sure that, all of the physical stuff, I tried to postpone it as long as possible so that I could get to know her and like her for more than just her looks and more than just how she made me feel. And so, yeah, we've been going out for, 2-3 months now. It's been going really great. We have a really great relationship. We still keep the physical stuff to,
minimum.
a minimum, because, I told her, it's dangerous for me, and, I don't want to cross that boundary. I want to respect her because she's a daughter of God, and she wants to respect me too. She's very respectful of me, and we're really trying to wait for a potential marriage to do that stuff. So, and I was telling Daniel the other day, hold on a second.
He needs water.
Sorry about that. I'll just close with this. I was telling Daniel the other day, it's the healthiest relationship I've ever been in, and I'm happy in it, even though we haven't had sex.
That's a good thing.
It used to be very much like, if I wasn't having sex, I wasn't happy in the relationship, and that's what would cause a lot of the fights. And so, being in this, following God, is much healthier, much happier for me, and I would encourage you all to do the same. So,
hopefully that was
sorry, guys,
clarification on
yeah.
both those two videos that we just, the one that we did before, and this one was a good clarification on relationships. And as we keep talking, keep doing these videos, we'll end up sharing more, I guess, as well.
Yeah.
So thanks for watching. Give us comments if you have anything. And
if you'd like to learn more about Daniel, please click on this video.
And then you can watch Ben over here.